Hello everyone. This is part 2 of an ongoing series which should be understood by all, even the most skeptical, about the beneficial knowledge I've gained so far this year. If you haven't watched the previous video, then I recommend you do so. I went over an example of how the mainstream media are more for the government than the rest of us. They hide things from us. I showed and discussed the connection between FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the connection between DHS and Walmart. All this, in addition to how I've become aware of something being really, really wrong with the direction humanity is going. That's a little rehash of part 1. My suggestion to you is to pause or stop this video and watch the other one for yourselves, either by going on my channel or clicking the link I'll leave in the description box. By the way, hi there, Snow Matrix. I'm glad you found my channel. I've noticed quite a few more people have subscribed. That's cool. I hope 50 or more do. I hope more and more of you are sharing of what I found out, because it's really important to educate yourselves about truths that are being censored out. To anyone who remembers watching the previous video, welcome back! I have more to say and share really, really important facts that the news never reports on. The truth about most schools. How many of you know about this phone app, The Behavioral Observation of Students in Schools, by Pearson Education Incorporated? This is something for observers to use to monitor the behaviors of children and teachers in classrooms and record them in real time on their phones, according to the BOSS user guide I've looked at. I'm going to leave a link to the user guide so you can read it. I'll leave links to everything I'll show you so you can look at them at your own pace. The following is an example of a teacher-student behavior observation form. The purpose of this form is to collect information on the behaviors of the teacher and students in an effort to examine their congruence during a minimum of 20 minutes of continuous instruction. For each phase of the lesson observed, indicate the start time of each activity and use the codes to record what is occurring in the classroom. Use multiple choice codes if necessary for each category. Comment or write questions in the space provided as needed. So as you can see, there's a table here for activity, clock time, one column for the teachers, one column for the students. And as you see, there's the behavior key here. And what they mean. Presenting, questioning, answering, praising, direction giving, scolding, redirecting, listening, motivating, etc. And here's a student behavior key. There's on task, listening, watching, doing other work, reading, responding appropriately, hands-on activity, questioning. And notice that the key code here is marked in red for off task. Inattentive, distracted, or daydreaming, doing other work, engaged in off-task conversation, disturbing others, playing, or other. And there's the strategies key and the grouping key to the right. There are YouTube videos that show more examples of student behavior monitoring. I took a screen cap from one of them. Remember, on task appears to be actively engaged. Passive, off task. Looking around, daydreaming, playing with objects. Student is not engaged, but not distracting others. Off task, active. Out of seat, talking with others, singing, etc. These are distracting behaviors. The term behavioral intervention is generally used as any course of action designed to shape or modify students' inappropriate behavior or misbehavior into more appropriate behavior. In order to effectively modify behavior, one must analyze the function or purpose of the behavior. All human behaviors have some reason or function for occurring. The goal of any behavioral program is to facilitate lasting change. Often these children are referred to a behavioral specialist whose job is to help the classroom teacher create a behavioral management plan. The first step in this process is to help the child in their way of helping through behavioral change techniques to stop an interfering behavior and to replace it with a more appropriate behavior. The next step is to help the child the way they think they can help the child, to generalize the behavior which was learned in a specific time and place across settings and time, to identify what is distractive behavior, to assign action, and to correct that behavior. That's a large part of what makes many schools indoctrination centers. This video clip I found should help you understand the origin to how our American school system came to be this way.
And now we come to the great man himself, a man history records as being instrumental in the creation of America's public education system. Horace Mann was an American educator who served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, part of the American Congress. Horace Mann was the key reformer of the education system at the time. In 1837, he became the head of the newly created Board of Education in Massachusetts, where he began the work that would eventually earn him the title as the Father of American Public Education. After reading through the educational models of different countries, Mann finally hears about a particularly successful style that had been developed in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany. The Prussian system had shown to be such a success for the government's purposes that, accompanied by a few other educators, Horace Mann travels to Germany to investigate. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted.
All in favor, say aye.
Interest in Prussia had also been growing in the northern half of the continent. Around this time, the Canadian Superintendent of Schools, Egerton Ryerson, traveled to Prussia in search of a new model of education. His journeys also included visiting Horace Mann in Massachusetts to further examine the system he would eventually adopt. George Brown, the editor of Toronto's Globe newspaper, was even quoted saying that Ryerson had successfully imported Prussian education into Ontario. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. Interestingly enough, those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States to staff all the major universities. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. As the first secretary of the State Board of Education, Horace Mann promoted his new concept that the state is the father of children. He stressed that it was the responsibility of the state to ensure that education was provided for the child. A very noble idea, of course, but what exactly did he mean by that? And how did he define education? It seems like a very broad subject. It is a very broad subject. Education encompasses all of human history and all the knowledge we have gathered during that time. Not to mention, and perhaps most importantly, what we as human beings learn over our lifetime on a personal level. Horace Mann's 10th annual report in 1846 led to the first state law that made it mandatory for children to go to school. It was during that year that he supported the governor of Massachusetts in adopting the Prussian model of education for the entire state. How did he do that? The governor of the time, Edward Everett, as it turns out, was the very first to receive a PhD from, can you guess where? That's right, Prussia. From then on, it spread very quickly. Just after Everett installed the Prussian model in the state of Massachusetts, the governor of New York set up the very same method in 12 New York schools. Horace Mann's sister, Elizabeth Peabody, of the Peabody Foundation, saw to it that right after the Civil War, the Prussian system that was then being taught in the northern states was integrated into the conquered South. By 1900, most of the compulsory schooling laws that implemented the new system had been passed. From then on, every American child grew up under the Prussian system. So what exactly was the Prussian education system that everyone thought was so amazing that it just had to be adopted throughout the free world? To give you just a bit of background, in the 18th century, the Kingdom of Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany, was among the first countries of the world to introduce free and compulsory education. After the Prussians were defeated by Napoleon in 1806, it was decided that the reason why the battle was lost was that the Prussian soldiers were thinking for themselves in the battlefield instead of following orders. To make sure that this couldn't happen again, a new 8-year system of schooling was created. This new system provided not only the skills needed for the early industrialized world, such as reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also a strict education that taught duty, discipline, respect for authority, and the ability to follow orders. Elite children destined for higher offices went on to attend private schools, while the rest of the population had no access to the secondary education. They were destined for the working class. Through this new system, the Prussian court tried to create social obedience in the citizens through indoctrination. Every individual had to become convinced at the core of their being that the king was just, his decisions were always right, and the need for obedience paramount. In truth, the entire purpose of the system was to instill loyalty to the crown and to train young men for the military and bureaucracy. To do this, it was necessary to squeeze out all independent thinking from the masses. Influencing this new system from the beginning was Prussian philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Combining John Locke's view that the children are a blank slate and Rousseau's ideas on how to write on that slate, Prussia established an educational system that was considered scientific in nature. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined for the child what was to be learned, what was to be thought about, and how long to think about it. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, it was believed that one had to remove the power of most people to make sense out of the available information. In other words, critical thinking had to be done away with. Now, if you're wondering why the average person doesn't know that the North American education system is based directly on the Prussian model, it might just be because its original purpose was not designed for the good of the individual, but for the good of the government. The philosophy of Johann Fichte directly influenced the creation of the Prussian model of schooling, as he is quoted saying, "The schools must fashion the person, and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will." With quotes like these, you can see why his involvement is not well known. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. When this technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. In 1807, in a Berlin occupied by Napoleon, Johann Fichte gave a series of famous addresses to the German nation. Fichte spoke of the superiority of German people above all others. The content of these speeches was a catalyst for the Prussian education system and German nationalism. In other earlier works, he calls Jews a state within a state that would, quote, undermine the German nation. He openly expressed a desire to expel Jews from Germany. Fichte had a deep influence on the rise of the Third Reich, and continues to be deemed, quote, the spiritual father of modern neo-Nazism. Which begs the question, why would the father of American education make it a law that every child spend their youth in a system created by the father of neo-Nazism? Historians reflect that one of the greatest social factors that allowed a man like Hitler to rise to power was that the German people had been bred from birth to respect authority above all else and accept it without question. Which begs another question. If the entire population of North America is raised in a system adopted from pre-Nazi Germany, what are we setting ourselves up for?
I first read about how corrupt it is within the school systems through a thick paperback book by one of the underdog whistleblowers against this in American education, which what I've read is something that I found so disgusting. I recorded this next video myself so I could show it to you.
Here it is. Book that I read about a very brave and amazing woman, Anita Hogue. Beverly K. Ekman, she's awesome too. This is the incredible, true story of how one gutsy woman stood the whole education establishment on its head and forced a cabinet-level government agency to obey the law. What began as a civil citizen complaint against a local school district resulted in a massive investigation and cover-up of irregularities in this nation's education system dating back as far back as 1965. Education bureaucrats in Pennsylvania never dreamed they would one day be on the losing side of a fight against their Washington counterparts, whom they previously had imagined to be allies. Even less did officials in Washington dream they would be outmaneuvered into opening a Pandora's box of white papers, position papers, working papers, official memos, appropriations, review boards, secure lists, and task forces that eventually would reveal one of the most unique and mind-boggling cases of misrepresentation in American history. Anita Hogue did not expect to be declared winner in a case against the U.S. government, even before it went to court and before she had a chance to make her case public. And this was published in 1991, and you won't find this in any bookstore because this originally came from the Library of Congress. This book had been donated to me by someone who ordered this book years ago. And this had been sitting on a shelf for years and years and years. This was like way before I became aware that something was really wrong. Let me just skip ahead to the list of allegations here. Storing cross-referenceable personal information in non-secure data banks in such a way as to pose a threat to national and individual security and to violate the Fourth Amendment. Permitting the unauthorized cross-use of official records, using the Social Security number in a manner inconsistent with Section 7 of the Privacy Act of 1974, using taxpayers' money to amass personal data accessible as psychological profiles on children and their families. So the use of mandated school assessment tests fraudulently passed off as academic achievement tests. Scoring said tests for correct attitudes in violation of the pluralism ethic, and giving official seals of approval to curricula which support to remediate incorrect attitudes as assessed from the test, in violation of the legal prohibition against the federal government establishing curriculum for the nation's schools, creating a closed-loop distribution mechanism for federally approved curriculum materials, fraudulently representing or allowing to be fraudulently represented corrective, quote, remedial, end quote, programs aimed at promoting state-desired opinions and attitudes, abetting the obstruction of public access to documents that would truthfully explain and label attitudinal tests and programs, colluding with private tax-free organizations for the purpose of creating a national test and a national curriculum in violation of federal law. And this next one, oh, this is the big one right here. Allowing certain government agencies to be used as pawns of private organizations seeking to redefine, if not revamp, America's social economic framework, thereby placing these government agencies in the position of conspiring to overthrow the U.S. Constitution, obtaining funds for one purpose and using them for another, inducing local educational institutions to accept federal money for ulterior purposes and by deceptive means, creating and subsidizing, in effect, a legalized private education system mislabeled a public school, subsidizing a policy of practicing medicine without a license by permitting medically unlicensed practitioners to carry out therapeutic programs and violating the Competition in Contracts Act. Okay, if voting matters, if we are supposedly protected by the U.S. government, then why would this sort of corruption be allowed to happen in schools? Schools are not safe places for kids. No.
The very fact that behavior modification, teaching one-sided lessons, personality assessment tests, and the plot to overthrow the U.S. Constitution, in addition to news reporters never mentioning about this, that is a major reason why I don't want any part in supporting government. News reporters in TV and newspapers won't discuss any of this because that's too hot of a potato to touch. Tss, ow, ow, tss. Oh, don't talk about that. No. Won't touch it. Won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Teachers are instructed to brainwash kids. Change agents, advocate or organizer agitators, also termed as technical assistants or facilitators, they are trained to use the psychological manipulation method subtly within groups of individuals who show up to various forms of meetings, councils, or boards to, quote, help determine public policy in one field or another. The Delphi technique was first developed by the Rand Corporation, a government think tank group for the U.S. Department of Defense during the Cold War. I'll share parts of this old 70s document that was issued to the U.S. Department of Health, Welfare, and Education, as you can read towards the upper right of this screenshot. I first heard of this from reading Ekman's book. I Google searched How to Implement Change by Clyde W. Hall and found it very easily. This paper described the science of managed change and how this technique can be applied to educational situations. It also points out current educational problems to which this science of change should be applied. The initial step of a managed change in a client system is the examination of the present state of affairs and an analysis of possible driving and restraining forces. The establishment of a relationship and mutual respect between change agent and client system is an important next step. After a successful relationship has been established, the third step involves collecting information to clarify and diagnose the client system's problems, examining alternative routes and goals, establishing goals and intentions of action, and transforming intentions into actual change efforts. Concluding steps involved stabilizing the change and withdrawal of the change agent. Science has been rightly called the most powerful force in the modern world. As a method of inquiry, it is man's most reliable source of knowledge about his environment and himself. Experimental in temper and scornful alike of both sacred tradition and temporal authority, it has moved triumphantly during the past 4.5 centuries from conquest to conquest. Beginning its revolutionary career in the sphere of astronomy, it has left its mark on every field of thought. It has penetrated to some degree, though by no means equally, all departments of life and overthrown countless ideas and customs hallowed by time. Pointedly, the modern application of scientific acumen can lead to the effective implementation of legislated change in all spheres of human behavior, especially in education. In this paper, attention will be given to the science of managed change and how this technique can be applied to educational situations. Attention will also be given to current educational problems to which this science of change should be applied. Concepts of change. What do we mean by change? Funk and Wagnall's Standard Dictionary of the English Language defines change as a cause to vary or become different in appearance, form, or nature, which implies to make other than the way it was through transforming, transposing, converting, or altering. Change distinctly denotes the making of a thing into something other than what it has been in some degree. There are a variety of changes which may take place in a dynamic society. Some of these may be short or long-term, spontaneous, planned, controlled, or uncontrolled, and may take place in an individual, group, institution, community, state, nation, or continent. For example, a sudden earthquake may violently alter temporarily or permanently the behavioral characteristics of an individual. The passing of time modifies the strata of the earth and creates an evolution in animal and plant life that relates to changing environmental conditions. Man, for certain specific reasons, can and does consciously induce change in people, institutions, and his physical environment. Mankind throughout the ages has been cognizant of the importance of understanding and guiding changes which will affect his well-being. The philosophers of ancient Greece and the sages of India and China sought tirelessly to prescribe practical solutions to the preparation for and the guiding of changes which mankind would eventually encounter. During the Dark Ages, man sought preparation for and technique to cause changes through theological rather than philosophical or scientific means. Modern man has recognized that this problem requires the same scientific approach he uses to effectuate other desirable aspects of his life, and has come up with what is called legislated, managed, or planned change. This type of change originates in a decision to make a deliberate effort to improve a system and obtain the help of an outside agent in making this improvement. This approach requires the definite identification and isolation of the problem, proceeds through a series of activities directed toward finding a solution to the problem, and ends with diffusion of the solution on the target population. In other words, where a deliberate attempt is made to change a situation, the course of this change can be charted, analyzed, evaluated, and stabilized. Change agent and client system. In a managed change process, an outside agent is usually involved, which is referred to as a change agent, and the population with which it works is called a client system. The change agent may be a practitioner who is able to open up channels of communications that were previously closed between two persons, or a highly organized professional organization working with a large industrial complex on changes in personnel organization in order to increase production and profits. A change agent may be an individual or group of individuals, and the client system may be an individual, small group, institution, organization, or community. A professional change agent may be a teacher, psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker, human relation expert, marriage counselor, public administration consultant, community council organizer, university, etc., depending upon the type of client system in which a change is being induced. Stages of planned change. It is generally recognized that managed change proceeds through several distinct stages from beginning to end. In 1951, Kurt Lewin suggested a three-phase change cycle consisting of 1. Unfreezing of present situation, 2. Moving to a new condition, and 3. Refreezing or stabilizing the changed situation. By unfreezing and freezing, that's programming and unprogramming, refreezing, reprogramming. So let's pause right here a bit to know who Kurt Lewin is. Kurt Zadok Lewin was a German-American psychologist known as one of the modern pioneers of social, organizational, and applied psychology in the United States. Kurt Lewin, exiled from the land of his birth, made a new life for himself. In this new life, Lewin defined himself and his contributions within 3 lenses of analysis. Applied research, action research, and group communication were his major offerings to the field of communication. Lewin is often recognized as the founder of social psychology and was one of the first to study group dynamics and organizational development. There's another name mentioned in the Clyde Hall paper document here, Lipid, as in Ronald Lipid, who was a professor of psychology and sociology at the University of Michigan. I also found out that he was advocate for the use of behavioral science to improve quality of service and productivity within organizations. Continuing from where I left off on the Hall paper, Lipid, several years later, enlarged this cycle to a 5-step process encompassing 1. The development of a need for change, unfreezing. 2. Establishment of a change relationship. 3. Working toward change, moving. 4. Generalization and stabilization of change, freezing. And 5. Achieving terminal relationship. Daniel H. Jenkins, another psychologist likely, identified 4 general steps in which must be taken if the desired change is to be effectuated in a client system, and he classified these as 1. Analyzing the present situation, 2. Determining the changes which are required, 3. Making the changes indicated by the analysis of the situation, and 4. Stabilizing the new situation so that it will be maintained. I found this step-by-step list from Lipid, Watson, and Wesley Change Theory. Ronald Lipid, Gene Watson, a head psychotherapy researcher from Toronto, and Bruce Wesley, who was a teacher from the University of Wisconsin between 1946 and 1968. 1. Diagnose the problem. 2. Assess the motivation and capacity for change. 3. Assess the resources and motivation of the change agent. This includes the change agent's commitment to change, power, and stamina. 4. Choose progressive change objects. In this step, action plans are developed and strategies are established. 5. The role of the change agents should be selected and clearly understood by all parties so that expectations are clear. Examples of roles are cheerleader, facilitator, and expert. 6. Maintain the change. Communication, feedback, and group coordination are essential elements in this step of the change process. 7. Gradually terminate from the helping relationship. The change agent should gradually withdraw from their role over time. This will occur when the change becomes part of the organizational culture. The Clyde Hall paper overall is an interesting read as an introduction to change agentry. That's all for now. There's more to share about change agents. I found another U.S. Department of Health, Welfare, and Education document, the Training Manual for Change Agents. I intend to make a second part featuring that and going over some of the things about the Common Core standards that are very disturbing. I'll end this video by sharing you this old song by Harry Chapin called Flowers Are Red. I want to add that the child mentions about so many colors in the rainbow, and yes, the rainbow is a symbol of the LGBT flag. However, this isn't a pro-LGBT or anti-LGBT song. Chapin wrote this song because he knew that behavior modification happens in schools.
Boom, 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 ba-doom, boom, boom, boom. A little boy went first day at school. He got some crayons and he started to draw. He put colors all over the paper, for colors was what he saw. The teacher said, "What you doing, young man?"
"I'm painting flowers, see?"
"Well, this is not the time for art, young man. And anyway, flowers are green and red. There's a time for everything, young man. A way things should be done. You got to show concern for everyone else. You're not the only one." And she said, "Flowers are red. Green leaves are green. There's no need to see flowers any other way than the way they always have been seen." But the little boy said,
"There are so many colors in the rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in the flower, and I see everyone."
Well, the teacher said, "You're sassy. There's a way that things should be, and you'll paint flowers the way they are. So repeat after me." She said, "Flowers are red. Green leaves are green. There's no need to see flowers any other way than the way they always have been seen." But the little boy said again,
"There are so many colors in the rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in the flower, and I see everyone."
Well, the teacher put him in a corner. She said, it's for your own good, and you won't come out till you get it right, responding like you should. Well, finally he got lonely, frightening thoughts filled his head, and he went up to that teacher, and this is what he said.
Flowers are red, the green leaves are green. There's no need to see flowers any other way than the way they always have been seen.
Well, time went by like it always does. He moved to another town, and the little boy went to another school, and this is what he found. The teacher there was smiling. She said painting should be fun, and there are so many colors in a flower, so let's paint everyone. And that little boy painted flowers in neat rows of green and red, and when the teacher asked him why, this is what he said.
Flowers are red, the green leaves are green. There's no need to see flowers any other way than the way they always have been seen.
But there must still be a way to have our children say, there are so many colors in the rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in a flower, and I see everyone. There are so many colors in a rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in a flower, and I see everyone.